A Conflict of Visions by Thomas Sowell, a perhaps indispensable book for understanding the differences in mentality between different people as regards certain crucial issues and topics. But Thomas Sowell, you may be familiar with the name, economist and sort of social philosopher who has written a number of books. But of the books which he has written, it is this book, A Conflict of Visions, which he himself considers to be, I suppose you might say, his magnum opus, his greatest and most important work. And as I said a moment ago, I would myself consider this book to be something of an indispensable read for understanding the differences in outlook between various different people. But what is this book about? What is the gist of A Conflict of Visions? Well, the aim of the book is to identify and explicate the schism between the mindsets of different people and how this leads to disparity of conduct in realms such as politics, economics, law, culture in general, that kind of thing. So Thomas Sowell in the book identifies two different mentalities, two different visions which people can subscribe to, the constrained vision and the unconstrained vision. Now, it's important to note here at the outset that he is not making this distinction like in stone and saying that like any one person can be necessarily conclusively lumped in here or there. Rather, it's something of a spectrum. The visions, although they are denoted in the work as constrained and unconstrained for convenience and expediency, it might be helpful to identify them with kind of more colloquial terms, more common language, such as conservative and progressive or right and left, kind of. But again, this is kind of a spectrum thing. It's not just like, you go there, you go there. A person can hold any number of views which might fit either vision. People may be rather eclectic in their views, but the main gist of the work is that the conflicts that exist in society are generally attributable to the conflict of visions between the constrained vision, the more conservative, more kind of quote unquote right leaning vision, and the unconstrained vision, which is the progressive quote unquote left leaning vision. So, what actually is the criteria for these visions? What comprises the constrained and the unconstrained vision? Well, these are worldviews, but it perhaps might better be put that these are ways of seeing ourselves as people. What Sowell says the constrained vision is characterized by is the belief that human nature is something that is fixed, that it is unchanging, that it is rigid, and that it is mostly self-centered, self-motivated. Whereas conversely, the unconstrained vision views human nature as something that is not necessarily fixed, but is malleable, that can be molded and improved, and is not necessarily wholly selfish or self-interested. So that is kind of the distinction here between the constrained and the unconstrained. There is a lot of discussion in the book about the ramifications, the implications of these two different views. But kind of in short, these views lead to, as probably is apparent by, society at large, they lead to radically different outcomes in conduct and behavior, and they lead to radically different goals that each person wants for the society in which they dwell, depending on whatever view they subscribe to. And also, differences in these views come down to what they rest upon. The unconstrained vision is more kind of abstract in a sense. It is built more upon pure rationality on an individual level, that is, specific intellectual elites, you might say, putting forth ideas and guiding, if they can, the direction which civilization follows, whereas the constrained vision is more characterized by tradition. The adherents to the constrained vision generally rely more on precedent experience and inherited knowledge, a heritage, if you will, when it comes to decision making. Now, this leads to radically different, as I said, perspectives in fields such as law, social equality, and also power. And the reason why this is so is because the very definitions of words such as equality or justice differ dramatically between these two visions. So we can start with equality. Those who subscribe to the more constrained vision define equality in terms of like processes, like equality before the law. That is generally speaking, in the more kind of conservative, constrained vision, equality means equality of treatment, equal recognition inside of the law, that every person is endowed with certain rights, and that we have to treat people equally regardless of background or context. On the other hand, the unconstrained vision sees equality in much more direct, concrete, material terms. That is, equality of rewards or equality of outcome. And so, because of that, the unconstrained vision is much more geared towards redistribution of wealth and such, whereas the constrained vision is not really concerned with that at all. It's just concerned about making sure that people are treated equally and given fair play, if you will. And also in the realm of law, the definition of justice is drastically different as well. And the way that we approach justice, the concept of justice differs significantly depending on what vision we adhere to. Constrained vision relies more, like I said, on tradition and precedents, and that's kind of why courts, judges which are more conservative leaning often refer extensively to legal precedents and kind of upholding the law as it is written to the letter based upon all that has come before, and kind of just extending that lineage further. Whereas those judges who are more progressively minded and subscribe more to the unconstrained vision generally kind of are known more to legislate from the bench and may be inclined to modify or perhaps even flout laws, legal precedent altogether, and rule based more on specific individual context, which may differ from scenario to scenario. And then let's talk about the differences in views when it comes to the notion of power, because the concept of power is viewed, again, very, very differently between adherents of the constrained and the unconstrained vision. The adherents of the constrained vision generally tend to view power very suspiciously, and societies that are guided more by a constrained vision are more concerned with ensuring that power is not centralized and that power is kind of diffused and guarded by certain checks and balances to make sure that no one person or no one group accumulates an overly large amount of power, whereas conversely in the unconstrained vision, power is often viewed as an efficacious means of achieving certain material ends. And so societies that are guided by a more unconstrained vision often do not check power. They just are more concerned about making sure that the right people get into the positions of power to wield it. Sowell makes a great distinction here between the mentalities which guided the revolutions in America and France. The American Revolution was a revolution which was guided pretty much wholly by a constrained vision, at least as regards power. The American government was set up to be non-centralized, to have three branches that each can check each other, and to ensure that you don't have another King George, another king that can just do whatever they want. The goal with America was that no one person should ever be given excess power, because, in the words of Lord Acton, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But this was not the case. This was pointedly not the case in the revolution in France. The French Revolution was guided wholly almost by the unconstrained vision, and as a result of that, they were not concerned with checking power. They just wanted to make sure that the right people were put into the positions of power. And so even when heads started to roll by the thousands, they didn't really change their tact. They didn't try to, draft a constitution which would limit the powers that any one person or group could hold. It was just kind of like, as soon as we get the right candidate in here, things are going to be groovy. And that's kind of the difference between the constrained and the unconstrained vision as Sowell sees it. One, again, views human nature as fixed, it is unchanging. And because of that, we have to work with what we've got. And so the constrained vision does not really focus on like solutions to problems, because it recognizes that solutions may be impossible. Rather, what the constrained vision is focused on is effective trade-offs, whereas the unconstrained vision is very concerned with like problem solving, with like fixing things, remedying ills, that kind of thing. Again, you can see the differences that this results in as regards the effects on society between these two different outlooks. So yeah, that is the gist of a conflict of visions, the constrained vision and the unconstrained vision, and the kind of friction and disparate outcomes that they lead to. Now, to end on a more, perhaps, I guess, personal note, I would say that I don't really make any secret that I personally, in general, subscribe to a more constrained vision now. Anyway, it wasn't always necessarily that way, but myself, I now more or less do fall under the camp of the constrained vision. But I want to end by reading something from the book, which really resonated with me, because it kind of rammed home a major reason why my vision is more constrained. And it has to do with the way that the unconstrained vision views humanity at large. So, as I said, those in the constrained vision often adhere more to tradition and viewing society as a sort of systemic thing, which is much too large for any one person or group of persons to manage or regulate. Where conversely, in the unconstrained vision, it's reliant much more on the ideas and abstractions of the elites of the society, the more intellectual, enlightened few who have surpassed the more unenlightened, benighted many. And so that's kind of a major distinction to note between the two visions. But what Sowell says here in the section entitled Visions of Equality, I would like to read, because it really resonated with me and it really kind of rammed home why my vision is what it is. So, as he says here, as noted in Chapter 3, the distribution of knowledge and reason is vastly more unequal in the unconstrained vision, because its definition of knowledge and reason as articulated information and syllogistic rationality puts them much more in the province of the intellectual elite. But the cultural conception of knowledge in the constrained vision makes it far more widely diffused, and the systemic logic of cultural evolution and survival in competition dwarfs to insignificance the special logical talents of the intellectual elite. Thus, while the common man was seen by Hobbes to be more capable in some respects than his more highly educated social superior, and the latter's social claims were at least viewed very skeptically by Smith, Friedman, and Hayek, a vast chasm between the existing intellectual and moral capabilities of the common man and those of the intellectual elite has been an enduring characteristic of the tradition of the unconstrained vision. In an 18th century world where most people were peasants, Godwin declared that the peasant slides through life with something of the contemptible insensibility of an oyster. Rousseau likened the masses of the people to a stupid, pusillanimous invalid. According to Condorcet, The human race still revolts the philosopher who contemplates its history. In the 20th century, George Bernard Shaw included the working class among the detestable people who have no right to live. He added, I should despair if I did not know that they will all die presently and that there is no need on earth why they should be replaced by people like themselves. So that is a major reason why I do not, or no longer anyway, really subscribe to in the unconstrained vision. And it is because of the rather duplicitous motives behind the unconstrained vision much of the time. It should not be thought that those championing societal reform or equality or whatever crusade is at hand are doing so because of genuine beneficence towards mankind. Rather, I would argue that rarely, if ever, are such reformers and crusaders motivated by genuine philanthropy, but are more often than not motivated by the desire to remake the world as they want it to be remade, if not just flat out self-aggrandizement. The contempt that those intellectual elites feel for the common man is, to me, very disgusting. And I know that's not necessarily characteristic of all of them, but I think if you dug deeply enough, you might see that it is a kind of a hallmark of that outlook. And another reason why I personally subscribe more to the constrained vision is because I think that to view human nature as something malleable, to believe that people can be fundamentally molded and refashioned is a dangerous proposition and one that entails some very dangerous implications. This kind of dovetails nicely, I think, with C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man, another indispensable work, in my opinion, which I have also reviewed. But in that book, C.S. Lewis makes the point that power over nature, or even power over human nature, only ever means the power of some people over other people. So if you really believe that human nature can be molded, that humans can be improved, then the next logical question is, well, who do we entrust with the molding? Who do we entrust with the refashioning? Who do we entrust with the improving? Who do we place the soul of humanity in the hands of to refashion and remake in their image? I think that this might qualify as something of a boomerang principle, which might actually invalidate the unconstrained vision to a certain extent, at least. But that is another reason why I myself do not subscribe to the unconstrained vision so much in general, because I don't think that human nature is really malleable. In fact, again, to echo Lewis, to even attempt the refashioning of humanity would kind of, I think, invalidate certain fundamental principles of the vision which seeks to do so. I suppose, to quote Slipknot, people equal shit. Not necessarily, but not really. I mean, but I do think that human nature is much more fixed, and I think that the desire to reform it is, again, something of a boomerang principle that sort of invalidates the unconstrained sentiment which seeks to do so in a certain sense. But once again, that is another major reason why I personally do not subscribe in general to the unconstrained vision, but rather more so to the constrained vision. But yeah, that is A Conflict of Visions by Thomas Sowell. Once again, an indispensable read, I think, for understanding the differences in outlook between different people and understanding why things are so divided in society and why there's really no hope of fixing that, because, like I said at the outset, it's a spectrum, but there is kind of a crossover point where there are points where there's not much hope of resolving these, because the very definitions of certain terms, the very ways of looking at things are so radically different that you can't really reconcile them. And that's why when you see like debates sometimes between people of the constrained and people of the unconstrained vision, sometimes it's just like they're talking past each other. again, because their mentality is just so different, their apprehension of reality is so distinct that there's just very little common ground sometimes. But this book is very enlightening and very insightful, I think, to understanding that, uh, and kind of perhaps helping the reader and themselves recognize where they actually stand, perhaps better than they did beforehand. But yeah, A Conflict of Visions, fantastic book. Again, just an indispensable work. Yeah, so I don't normally rate works such as this, and I won't rate this, but I will say I do think that it is incredibly valuable and incredibly insightful, and I would highly recommend it. So, yes, A Conflict of Visions by Thomas Sowell. Have you read A Conflict of Visions? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. And if you haven't read A Conflict of Visions, hard recommend for me. Pick it up. I think it has the power to make a lot of things very plain, kind of draw things into focus. And again, I think it's just an immeasurably valuable book because it really does identify the root causes of so many of the divisions in society and help you understand where those things are coming from, and the fact that people are just so fundamentally different in their mentality sometimes that they just apprehend reality differently. But yeah, pick it up. Very valuable read, very insightful. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.